You're listening to the Building and Branding Podcast, brought to you by Virtual Vision. I'm your host, Amanda Stichter. On this show, I sit down with experts in the restoration and home services industry to hear their stories of how they built their businesses to succeed and stand out. Our conversations will uncover the challenges they've faced, the strategies they've employed, and the pivotal moments that defined their paths. We'll also dive into the critical importance of branding and marketing in this field, sharing insights on how to create a compelling brand that resonates with customers and stands out in a competitive market. Join us as we blend practical advice with inspiring real-life stories, providing you the tools and motivation to craft precision and build a lasting brand. Welcome to Building and Branding. Let's get started. In this episode of Building and Branding,
it's a very humbling process to bring somebody in from the outside to come in and look at your company and tell you what you're not doing right. And we're going to get a bright spotlight out, and we're going to start looking in the corners because that's where the problems lie. We're in a crisis business. Like, we respond to emergencies. There's so many people, can't make a plan because I don't know what's going to happen this afternoon. But the reality is there's things that still need to happen, and there's directions that you want to go, and there's goals that you want to hit. Why not make a plan in order to get there and start with how you're going to plan your day tomorrow or your business around the corner, so you have your map and your guides to get you from here to there.
Before we jump into this next episode, I just wanted to give you a little heads up that I did have some audio issues with my microphone in the first few minutes, so hang tight with me. I promise that it does get better after a little bit, but I apologize in advance for the audio issues that you will hear.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Building and Branding Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Stichter, and as always, today we are going to spend some time diving into conversation with a leader in our industry who has built a fantastic brand and business that I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. So we're going to spend today picking his brain and diving into some valuable conversation. So today I am joined by a man of very many talents, well known in our industry. Today I am joined by Phillip Rosebrook. Thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely excited to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Me too. Okay, so I could read your bio on your website, and as I said, man of many talents, you do a lot of things, but I would much rather prefer you to tell me about yourself. So
fantastic.
Give our listeners a rundown and tell us your story.
Let me look at my notes to figure out what I said. No. I started out in restoration as a high school. I spent my last year in high school. My first year in restoration was spring break. This is what I was doing instead of Mexico at a beach. I was spring break cleaning walls on a restoration crew. That was my first week in restoration. It was the spring of 1988. Spent 10 years in restoration, sat in nearly every seat in a restoration company. And during that time, so I worked my way through college and then just kept filling roles. And so at the end of 10 years, it was a family business. My father sold the company, and he had this belief that restorers needed someone to talk to who'd been in their shoes. And so he took a road trip, drove from Oregon to Michigan and back, and trying to determine whether that was what he wanted to do with the next chapter of his life. And when he got back, he had hung his shingle up and became business mentors in October of 1997. Meanwhile, I moved to Colorado, was helping the company that acquired us. I helped them open an office in Fort Collins. So I spent a month in Denver, and then 5 months up in Fort Collins and open up a branch office up there for them. And meantime, my father was a businessman, and not so much a restorer. He understood restoration because he ran a company for 10 years, but he would give people a plan, say, here's where you go in your business. And then they'd get to the other side and say, okay, now how do I do it? And he'd pick up the phone and call me. And so he told them I hired people. And so he reached out to me and said, hey, why don't we do this together? And so I decided after some soul searching and really figuring out where I wanted to be at the next chapter of my life, I decided to jump on board with him, became his partner, and I also became a 27-year-old business consultant. And at that point, it was March of 1998 that I happened on board with him. I became a business consultant, and it was a little different than what I'm doing today. But largely, what we do is we team up, and he'd go create a business plan and say, "Here's where you go in your company." I'd follow him up, and we'd pull the plan off the shelf and say, "Let's go do it." And so my roles evolved a lot over those time. But for the last 25 years, traveled around North America. Had one little stint down in Australia. The time zone's tough for communication, but anyhow, across North America, helping restoration companies create a vision and a plan for their business, and then walk them through that plan. And so I'm a generalist as a business advisor, but my sandbox is restoration. And it's just fun now at this point because every company I go to is a little bit different. And just learning from other people's strengths and weaknesses and what they do well, and then also going through this change management process is it's fun because you just get to see what's worked, what doesn't, what the best practices are, how people integrate and implement change in their business. And so I get a little better each time and learn something new from each of the companies that I work with. Plus, I get to do something I love, which is helping people create successful businesses and stay attached to the restoration industry without having to be on call.
I love
Yeah.
Well, what a cool story. Just hearing, that growth and starting as the family business and then starting at such a young age, like jumping into that consultant view, which I think is a really powerful position, especially in businesses in general, but especially in this industry. So do you mind if I dive into that for a second?
Oh, let's do it. Yes, of course. Of course.
Awesome. Okay. So, I think maybe in the last decade or so, I feel like there's been a much higher push towards welcoming consultants into your business and really getting that outside perspective of, what is the best way to move your business forward? If someone asked you, like, why is a consultant necessary, or how do I know if my business would benefit from a consultant? I'm sure you get this question all the time. What do you tell them?
Well, so first of all, this is not going to be a sales pitch. This is just a management process and a reality in companies. And the first thing I'm going to acknowledge is that it's a very humbling process to bring somebody in from the outside to come in and look at your company and tell you what you're not doing right. And as I would tell people, don't bring us in if you don't want us to know what's happening in your business. And we're going to get a bright spotlight out, and we're going to start looking in the corners because that's where the problems lie. And so, so first of all, we recognize as advisors that this is not an easy process. But at the same time, in a lot of companies, it's a necessary process. And there's very few companies I go into, and I think, matter of fact, I think clearly, I don't think I've ever run across a case where we didn't come in and say, okay, yeah, things are working well, and I'm not a big but person, so the and is a good statement there. So things are working well, and there's some areas we can find things that need to be done a little bit different. If you just imagine having somebody who understands your industry, who understands best practices, who, I probably interviewed 1,000. Probably not 1,000. I probably interviewed 500 really good full-term bookkeepers in a restoration company. I have met and talked to thousands of technicians, and you look at best practices. And so you have somebody from the outside who comes in and says, there's better ways to do this. And it's, yes, partly my experience because I've done and been there, but it's been 26 years. And so it's maybe a little bit less relevant. But over the last 26 years, here's best practices. Here's what here's what the best project managers, the best marketing people, what an owner who wants to grow and scale their company, what their role and expectations are. And so to have somebody come in from the outside, and there's lots of good, when we started, there was a couple consultants in the industry. Now there's a lot of them. There's some really good ones out there. And so the process of having somebody who understands your business, who can also look and say, there's different ways to do this, because sometimes you just get you're so close to the challenges, problems, and people that you don't look and
Yeah.
say, maybe there's different or better ways, or help me see around the corner. I'm talking to a guy right now. He's got a really profitable company. He's got a successful company. And when I'm talking to him, he's got elite performers around him. I'm like, wow, what do you need a consultant? And he said, I want to grow my company, and I haven't seen what it looks like on the other side. And so a couple of things I told him, I said, if one of the things you could do is sit there at the size you are. That's a great spot. You're maximizing profitability. You've got great people on your team. If you bring me in, your net and gross margins might go down, but your revenue is going to go up. Is that something you really want to do? And I believe we're going to move forward in some way, because he says, I don't want to be the size I am. I'd rather go into that next level, but I don't know what I'm getting into. And so, I think the other, the company I'd worked with a couple of years ago, really successful organization, growing rapidly, but the owner and the leadership team needed not a referee, it's just somebody to kind of sit in between them and sort of help navigate those conversations and help make sure that so I used to listen to an audio series. It was called The Psychology of Winning. So something my dad gave me in the late 80s. And so it's been around for a long time, but it was very kind of foundational in some of the things I thought. And one of the things he said, and he was talking about marriage, and he talked about successful marriages. And he said, marriages quite often fail because they think it's sitting there and looking at each other. And he said, in reality, a successful marriage is looking in the same direction together. And so from an operational organizational standpoint, is making sure that you have a leadership team, a group of people who are working towards a shared destination and direction in your company. And that's hard to do sometimes when you're so stuck in the weeds. And so to have an outside influence of some sort to come in and let's guide the process. Let's take a look at what's working well, what can work better, how can we do more of what's working well, and how can we start fixing the things that aren't working well. And I think one of the other challenges, you could be in a spot in your company where everything's great and it's rosy and it feels good. However, people think a lot of times that a $10 million, you have a successful $1 million company, and if I'm going to be a $10 million company, I just do 10 times what I'm doing. But in reality, a successful $1 million company and a successful $5 million company don't look alike. They're built differently. And so how do you set your company up to scale it for future growth? And I think that that's the reality, saying somebody from the outside can look at your company and say, this is great. And so we come back to that, and here's the direction, here's the destination. And so I one of the things, there's a lot of operators that can get from here to there, but how many twists and turns do they get, and how much start and stop, and inefficiencies are built into that system. And so what if you shaved off 2 years of learning curve on that? Would that be helpful or beneficial to you?
Absolutely. I love that concept of realistically, things are really good, and because I think the reality is, anyone who's been in an operational role in a business, you realize that you almost always reach that pain point in that what started your business and grew it to a certain level, you have to make a choice. You can either stay there, or to move forward, what got you there probably isn't going to be what's going to get you to the next spot. And so often there's that friction of change then that has to happen, but many businesses don't know how to, what steps do you take? There's that point of okay, I've done what I know how to do and I got here, but I don't know what to do in that next step. And it sounds like that's really the benefit then of bringing in a consultant who can take that outside perspective and take you out of the weeds, give you that. I like to call it the umbrella view, the view that oversees everything, or the bird's eye view, without the tunnel vision that sometimes we get when we're in the day to day.
One of my father's favorite books, Marshall Goldsmith, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it just talks about the things, the elements of the success that you're currently achieving. You may be misattributing it to certain things, or they may be the things that keep you from getting to the next level. They may be
Mm-hmm.
inhibitors because they work today, but they're not going to work in tomorrow's world. So kind
Mm-hmm.
of a good perspective on that. And you know, the outside perspective of an advisor, a consultant, there's a couple of challenges. You know, the reality is you've got a lot of the answers and solutions in your company is trying to figure out what they look like and how to
Yeah.
package those together to
Mm-hmm.
really identify what direction you take, and having the confidence of knowing that the steps I'm taking today are the right steps to get me to that destination, as opposed to the
Mm-hmm.
indecisiveness that happens when you think you know but you don't know.
Right.
That makes sense?
Right.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely. Well, and I think so personally, I've had the opportunity to work with a business consultant, even as, as we've aimed to grow to the next level in virtual vision in our company. And there's that there's the desire to, I like to say climbing the hill, but a little bit sometimes when you want to grow to that next level in your business, you feel like you're climbing a hill in the dark and you don't know where that next pebble is that's going to be in front of you. And one of the most powerful aspects of a business consultant that I've had the opportunity to experience is it's almost like they're your flashlight. Like, oh, watch your footing right there. There's a rock that you're going to slip on in the dark, and just hold my hand. We're going to do this together. I'm going to guide you and we're going to get there. But I also love the aspect of business consulting that comes with the idea of personal and professional development, because it does, when you're the person that's interacting with a consultant, it pushes you outside of your comfort zones too, kind of like you said right at the beginning. How does that look like when you're working with someone? I mean, you probably have to challenge people naturally. That just comes in the role that you step into. How do you navigate that?
well, so there's a couple things in there. A lot of times, one of the biggest inhibitors to change in an organization. You ready for this? Is a big surprise. It's the owner. It's the owner, and
Yep.
it's hard. It's because you're an entrepreneur and you don't want to be told what to do, and
Right.
you became an entrepreneur because you wanted to be in charge of what you're doing
Right.
and what your process is. But I think at some point you realize, okay, I've reached the ceiling of my complexity, and
Mm-hmm.
in order to go to the next level, I need some support. Or there's somebody I talked to today, and they said I've been stuck at 5 million for the last 5 years. I can't get beyond
Mm-hmm.
that barrier. And so
Mm-hmm.
so the reality is you have to be willing to look at yourself and know that there might be some reality checks in here that aren't fun to hear.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so that's hard. Um, as a I don't know, as an outside person, not inside, it's not my company, which some people say, why don't you just take an equity stake? Wouldn't that be easier? I'm like, yeah, it would be easier. I'd make a lot more money. But at the same time, I'm now in your business, and now I'm really critical of the decisions you make and your timing.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I know there's a time frame to get things done and to do things and to execute change in an organization. Yet it doesn't always go that fast. There's a lot of things that inhibit that. And one of them
Mm.
is the owner's comfort zones. And as long as
Mm-hmm.
we're moving forward, that we're not doing things counter to what the plan is, the time frame is going to take what the time frame is. If the owner
Right.
says that I don't want to go there, I don't want to talk about that, or and as long as it's not a barrier, it's a something that inhibits the progression, which means it slows it down. But as long as we're moving
Mm-hmm.
forward and making progress, that's where I look and say,
Right.
okay, that's where the yardsticks are. If there's an acknowledgement there's a change needed, there's an acknowledgement that it's a problem and it's detrimental to the company and the growth and the plan, then we're going to back out of it. And if you're not willing to make those changes, then don't spend the money up front.
Mm-hmm.
However, if we get in the middle and with a number of companies, we just said it's okay. We need to part ways, because
Yeah.
don't pay us if you're not implementing. It's a lot of money. Go do something else with it. And so, how
Yeah.
do we deal with it? By starting with a plan and knowing where you're going,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledgement of problems, and that's where you stay tuned in. As this company changes and this vehicle is moving, your problems, opportunities, and challenges changed as well. And so if that's
Right.
happening, you got to have those frank conversations. And that's that's part of the challenge. People don't always want to hear it, and that's
Mhm.
where we don't finish a process. But if people are willing
Sure.
to acknowledge that, it's like, wow, this is really. One of the things that is important in this process, and it's a multi-year process always,
I'm sure.
is at the end of the first year, stop and take a look at where you've come from. Otherwise,
Hmm.
everything forward looks really hard and it's hard to achieve and get there. And so if we can take perspective of this hill we just climbed, we can look at where we're
Hmm.
going and it looks a little more manageable and you can
Mm.
see the way to get there. And so the change process for the owner starts with the owner, acknowledgement of I may be the problem, I'm willing to change, I'm willing to support change. And if that's the
Yeah.
case, now we have this agreement and we can successfully and effectively move forward. And to go back to your point is, are we making progress? And if we're making
Mm.
progress, okay, it's your business. We're going to go at the speed you can and will and desire to go. But let's get there. Let's
Sure.
get somewhere different.
Sure. I like that you brought up the idea of making sure, especially after that first year mark, understanding that there might still be what feels like mountains in front of you, but when you look at where you've been, suddenly it doesn't feel so big. In our house, we have this saying my husband and I say to each other all the time: we can't know where we're going if we don't look at where we've been. We always say
Uh-huh.
that to each other. It goes back to the idea of hindsight is 2020, but sometimes it's so easy to be so
Yeah.
focused on the
My water.
achievements that are in front of us that we forget those really big moments that we still need to celebrate and acknowledge that we've already
Mm-hmm.
been through. Even if sometimes those feel like in the moment, like that's just a little baby step. But in reality, that baby step could have been the catalyst for the next like big piece of growth that you're working towards. And I think it's important to recognize those moments, no matter how minuscule they feel right then and there.
You mentioned two words I think that are important: celebration and recognition. And
Mm,
it's really easy to miss those because you know what? It can be difficult, whether it's life or it's raising kids or it's building a business. Things can be difficult, and if you get too
mm,
caught up in the process, even the destination, it's gonna be really tough to get there if you don't take time to take stock, to celebrate, to recognize, to relax, and
yeah.
then to move on, to start doing high fives around the office and um, to have fun with what you're doing because frankly this is a lot of work. Work is a lot of work. So
Yeah, it's true
um,
though.
yeah, so celebrate and recognize because it will make things easier. Yeah, it makes things more enjoyable because you're spending the time. If you're
Hmm.
spending somewhere between 6 and 12 hours, some longer, hopefully not, at an office, at a job. And
Hmm.
if it's always the next hill, the next battle, the next goal,
Yeah.
then it's really tough to get there.
Yeah. It's so true. You use the word lighter, or I'm sorry, easier. I would almost use the word lighter. Like the
Hmm.
work is still there, but it just doesn't feel as heavy when you have the moments to celebrate and high five
Yeah.
and recognize. I think that's important.
Yes, and know that if you have a destination, you're going somewhere, they do get easier because you've got more
Hmm.
support staff around you. You get to more specialize. You get to focus on what you do best.
Yeah.
I had a client once, and she always called it highest and best. So when everybody's working at their highest and best in an organization, you start getting some real cool synergies from that. And
Mm.
so if I have this destination. This destination is when things are working well. Here's what it looks like. And one thing, if we can get highest and best, and we can start, the example would be when your project managers are sitting behind a keyboard, probably not their highest and best. But if they're out dealing with clients, solving problems, they can work at their highest and best. And you can have an administrator who can type somewhere between 60 and 100 words a minute, who can
Hmm.
really take care of that aspect well. So we're working at our highest and best, and now we get synergies and efficiencies.
Yeah, absolutely. That's powerful. It's good. That's really good insight.
Mm.
Just
Thank
discussing,
you.
the high levels and the minute details of the benefits of bringing someone into your business. I think that's huge. I mentioned at the beginning, a man of many talents. You do a lot of
Mm.
things. Now, there's another aspect of business mentors that you offer. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, this is kind of tied in something I did a long time ago. There was what was it, 2006? I started the first streaming video online restoration training program, and we had
The
48 hours of
first?
content out there. Nobody else was doing streaming. There was lots
No
of online
way.
programs. We had 48 hours of video content out there, and I involved some of the great industry leaders. I had Steve Toburin, Chuck DeWald, Barb Jackson,
Wow.
Michael Pinto. Somebody heard it once and is like, "Oh my God, this is my dream team." Like, okay, let's go. So we had brought that to the table. It ran its course. I filmed it, and we had, it had a pretty long shelf life. We had near 40,000 completed classes, and
Wow.
that's 40,000 hours of content that was viewed. It was really good for the time. I just never redid it because I always figured it was gonna that had a long shelf life, and the next iteration of that level of training wouldn't have the same shelf
Sure.
life just because things are moving so fast. But I did come back and took that. So my URL for what we're doing now is called restorationtrainingonline.com. And our service is pretty specialized. We get pretty deep, and it comes with a big price point. And so I always figure companies need to be at a certain size in order to digest that and be able to afford the capital and move forward with it. So yeah, thank you. That looks like exactly right. We've got, so I did a series of videos. I have 9 videos around what does a effective organization look like. Now, this is something different than what our first product was, our first streaming product, but it's built, it's a virtual workbook. So you've got
Hmm.
9 videos which guide a concept. And we start out with like, what does an effective business look like? What a leader role look like? And then we get into financials and financial management and accounting and benchmarks. We talk a little bit about production and marketing. So we take this whole level, but there's only 9 20-minute videos on it. And then within
Hmm.
that, there's downloadable documents, which is a virtual business plan, a chart of accounts for financials, a marketing plan template that you fill out. And so it's a guided self-worked program. So you kind of
Mm-hmm.
get the high level what business mentors might do to help a company build a scalable foundation. But
Hmm.
it's all of these written systems which drive the content which comes out of the videos, which explain here's how you create a successful, scalable, growing company. So there's 3 products on our online program. The first one is it's called Max Value, and the Max Value has these videos and the downloadable content, and it's kind of just a guided, business building plan for companies that want to do it themselves, for startup
Mm-hmm.
companies, or for people that just,
Mm-hmm.
what, I think I'd like some guidance and maybe there's something more here. What are those elements? And so we hit
Yeah.
a lot of stuff in those sessions, and hopefully that's really helpful to those companies that are at those levels, meaning they
Mm-hmm.
start up, they wanted to do it themselves, they're mid-sized and they really can't afford the cash flow, so it's all there for them. So I have that. We also have some downloadable documents. I think the big one in there is I had a client once who said, "Hey, could you write up some very specific it was performance appraisals." And so what I did is I created an organizational chart for his company, and I wrote performance appraisals for there's probably at least a dozen positions in restoration. And he
Wow.
said, "Great, Phil, could you then write up what they should be doing for each of these positions?" And
Hmm.
so I wrote a really long job description based with the prompts of all of the elements of the evaluation. So they ended up becoming almost a 10-page job description, which I thought, well, okay, you don't hire anybody on that. But if people wanted to know what the elements of the job they should be filling, that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then he
Mm-hmm.
said, "Hey, why don't you this is a long job. This is a long performance appraisal. If I wanted to give more often, would there be like a quick key point of
Hmm.
success that we should be evaluating on?" I said, "Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Out of every job, there was probably 3 to 5 things that people should be doing. And if they were doing those things well, they'd generally be filling their position well, and their annual performance appraisal would mean more. So we could kind of push things along. So we have the key points of success, we have the job descriptions, and we have the performance evaluation. So that's a program that's available on that the Restoration Training Online. The final one, which is by the time most people watch this, it's still a little, there's a few development things going on, is a much more comprehensive. It's called Clients for Life. And what we're doing is helping marketing people build their property management or funnels that are outside of just the insurance world. So if you wanted to diversify and do something different, it gives you kind of a guided process through that. And this one's a little different. It comes a little higher price point, but it's also got some personal coaching built in there. So there's some points at which you get to talk to an advisor within that. But it's instead of having to bring somebody out for all of those points and having a higher price point, it comes in a mid-range price point for that, but it also is a catered service. So that's the Restoration Training Online. So that's our new venture that we kind of kicked off. It's taken a little while to get it out, but it's most of it's live as of the recording here, and hopefully all of it will be live within probably 30 to 45 days.
That's amazing. And it sounds like really valuable content. I mean, I don't know anyone that couldn't benefit from at least one of those.
Yes.
That's huge.
If not, drop in and pick up a $25 ebook, or there's some ebooks in there that are good. There's some free content on there. One of the ones that is available free, I believe it's on that one. It's also available on the Business Mentors site. If you go there, it's businessmentors.net. There is a business health checklist, and I think it's a 50 or 60 point checklist where these are the elements of a successful company. And if all of those 50 things are in there, and you grade yourself, okay, yeah, my business plan is weak, but my financial analysis is strong, and you give yourself so you can self-rate it and then decide, hey, I'm gonna put my priorities in these areas. So that's a tool. And there's also, if you go, part of the Restoration Training Online video series is that checklist with a kind of a video to discuss the details of that. And so it comes up in a number of areas, but it's a really good resource.
Cool. That sounds awesome. Okay, I have to jump topics quick because I feel I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you about this, because I'm really excited about it. So you have a new thing coming up this fall that's big for our industry. You are launching a brand new event for technology and restoration, the Rebuild Conference. And I, for one, am really excited about it because I think we see that, obviously, first of all, I guess, clearly I work in the tech-ish space of restoration. But I think this is really such a heavy topic because so much of what we're doing now leans so heavily on tech and continues to advance. So first of all, how did the Rebuild Conference come to happen? What made you say, I think I'm going to do this?
Temporary insanity. So.
Good answer. I think every entrepreneur has that answer at one point or another.
Yeah. There's a couple elements. The first one is every year I do my annual predictions on the restoration industry. So I look and say, okay, in the next 12 months, here's the key drivers of change that you're going to encounter. And so as I was kind of researching, putting my thoughts together, I started looking at technology kept on bouncing up. It's been like an issue in the past, but it's my number one issue this year. It's like the number one driver of change and the biggest issue impacting restoration companies, because I figured that now it becomes actionable. And if you don't invest in technology, you're left behind and you're at a disadvantage. In the past, it's like, yeah, you can gain a competitive advantage. But if you're not investing in technology, you just made your life really hard. And you are going to be at a disadvantage to a majority of your competitors in your marketplace who have found the technology to lever and scale their business. So as we get squeezed by insurance companies, as we get squeezed by inflation, as we're having trouble finding employees. That was my previous issue. And number one for a couple of years was finding and keeping good people. Well, that's still an issue out there. But if we can lever the really good people we built into our companies and scale that, now all of a sudden we've built something. And so as I'm looking and saying, okay, we've got this issue of technology is an issue or a problem, and I'm looking at the InsurTech industry, and the InsurTech has 4 conferences that are all built around restoration. I thought, okay, well, restoration has too many conferences as it is. Why would I build another conference? And so I started thinking about the restoration conferences and saying, technology is an afterthought. It's on the trade show floor, but people are starting to skip trade shows. Like they'll go to the educational part of it, and I'm in a booth in the trade show, and well, like, where are all those people? I saw them in the meeting room, and they're not here because there's a lot of events. And so I thought, well, if we could focus on new solutions, if we could, and I started thinking, okay, now all this stuff's running through my mind. I'm thinking like the Consumer Electronics Show. Yeah, you go to the trade show, and it's like people are releasing products, and they've got real tangible things on the trade show floor that people can see and use. And so I started thinking, gosh, could we do something like that? And then I thought about why and how the trade show model is broken, and said, okay, if we can change the model through technology, through this technology event, maybe we can change the way trade shows are presented in the industry. And so I'm coming at it and saying, okay, there's some things for suppliers we're going to do different. There's some the things for attendees that we're going to do different. But it's going to be stuff that becomes actionable. And we're going to try to take, in some levels, we take the workshop level, the workshop presentations, and I shorten them up a little bit. We got half-hour sessions, we got hour sessions. If it's an hour, we got multiple people on a panel. If it's an individual, we're going to do a half hour. But in that half hour, it's going to be focused on what makes your business better. So if I've got a presentation, if I'm doing one, I'm going to come up and say, here's the 3 things we're going to talk about that you're going to take away today from my presentation. I'm going to give you my presentation. At the end, I'm going to give you an action plan on how you can execute and implement that in your company, but you're going to be workshopping it as you do it as well. So I hope the presentation level is different. I hope the trade show floor look and feel is different. I'm going to try to do matchmaking beforehand. So if somebody wanted to know about SEO, or they wanted to know how to tune up their marketing stuff, if they're going with the intention of learning about that, I'm going to have them identify that beforehand, communicate it to Amanda here and her team, and say, why don't you guys connect beforehand so you can set up a meeting and make it more valuable to the both of you so they can have good assessment. And then I think the other thing, I was talking to Paul Donald with Encircle, and Paul tells me, he says, there's too many trade shows, but I understand one of the challenges is people don't have a good strategic process to analyze how they go about the trade show or their technology. And because you guys are going to do because I know you are going to take a strategic approach to this process, then I'm in. And so he was one of the first ones to sign up as a supplier, even though he says, Phil, there's too many trade shows, but I get it, and I know why this is happening. And so I've got really passionate suppliers who are excited about it because they see, gosh, maybe we can do something different. And if we have a focus on technology, what that's going to do is allow the people who are looking for technology solutions to show up to the event, and it's going to be catered to them. Because if I go to a general show, and I don't care which one it is, technology is mixed in with everybody else. And it's tough to really carve out, like, well, what am I going to do? Because every one of these solutions could do something for me, or else they wouldn't be here. So how do I define what works best for me? And if I can try out a couple of the different solutions doing the same things, I'm going to find a fit for me. And that's so amongst the things that I'm looking at, saying, okay, how can we make this different, feel different, really focus on the ideas that help you scale and grow your business, utilizing the technology resources that are out there in the restoration industry, catered to restoration professionals that solve those problems that you're experiencing. And then people are talking about the process of how they do that. And Amanda, one other thing that I'm doing with it is we're identifying, so as you're there, you're going to be able to bring in 3 to 5 brand ambassadors, and I'm trying to figure out how to identify them. It's probably going to be a little button or something that goes on their lapel, or it goes on their the badge or something, and it's just going to say, I love virtual vision, ask me more. And so you're going to have your 3 to 5 brand ambassadors that are going to be there, and other people can be directed to them and say, you know what, I'd like to know how this works. And so, again, amongst the things that we're trying to do a little bit differently, and I'm excited about those different opportunities. And then I was a little bit late in building this. You know, typically you're going to plan over a year for an event. I woke up in January, couldn't sleep, and said somebody needs to do a restoration trade show. And so it took me probably better part of 90 days to get from I can't sleep to, and it wasn't sleep because I really was excited at the opportunity. I was excited that somebody should do this because
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be presented to the industry, and that's what we are. And it took me a long time to get that out. So if people hadn't heard about it up to now, that's on me, and I know why. But moving forward, if people decide not to come, it's not going to be because they haven't heard of it, because I'm partnering with the right people, the right
Mm-hmm.
organizations. I'm having some good conversations with some big influential industry players that will help push this
Mm-hmm.
forward, because they all identify that, yeah, you know what, there is a need for this and an interest in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a good time for this, and it's kind of a good opportunity to communicate that. So
I
we got
agree.
a good spot on the calendar where there's not a lot going on, and I just think that the time is right, and so I'm excited about it, and I'm excited about your partnership in this, and the other people that have jumped on board, because I think it's going to be impactful, and
I
that's at least
agree.
that's what I'm counting on. And I've got the agenda nearly done, and we're going to start pushing out promos for
Cool.
all the different levels of content. So there'll be some clarity coming up, and we're hoping to have. My goal is 500 people in attendance, because 500 people need to know about how they can scale and leverage technology in their business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's cool. I have to say, I think it was probably February. I was at an industry show, and I'm gonna guess that someone that you talked to someone else was like, just mark your calendars for the end of this year. There's a good chance this other show, and I can't tell you anything more about it. And I was like, oh, my interest
Hmm.
was immediately piqued. So since February, I have been waiting to hear about this. So I was so excited when you
Yeah.
when you announced it, and I am confident, first of all, that it's the right step. Our industry does need something that's so focused on the technology, because those are the questions I hear all the time. I'm sure you hear those questions all the
Yeah.
time. So why not provide them a space where they don't have to go hunt between everyone else for the tech solutions that they're looking for that can help provide the answers to
Yeah.
them? I'm so excited for it. I think it is going to be an amazing event and will just
Hmm.
continue to grow for years to come. I have no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And as so the priority for me is to create a world-class event. And if we create a world-class event, then the challenges that come with a startup, and everybody's like, okay, yeah, once we see it, it's going to be a whole lot easier to support, to participate, to attend, to whatever.
Mhm.
But one thing that I can be fully in control of is who's speaking, what the content is, how the trade show feels, and the experience that comes from that. And so that's what we're
Mhm.
really focused on, just creating a world-class event that is relevant, and respects the time that people participate and spend to go to an event,
Mhm.
that really gives them the return that they would need and the answers to the questions that they have.
Very cool. Now, just because I don't think we've said it yet, when is this event happening, and where can people find out more?
Ah, okay, it's October 28th, 29th, and 30th. We get you out of there before Halloween and Thanksgiving. Yeah, definitely too, before Halloween. And it's in San Antonio, Texas, October 28th through the 30th. And the website is rebuildconference.io. Yes, thank you. Wow, good, just right on cue. So rebuildconference.io, and that will have soon the agenda will be built on there. The sponsors are being added as we get to critical mass. I start dropping the sponsors in there, so there'll be more information. But I don't want to release a bunch of stuff and then have to start changing it around, which I did make a couple
Sure.
changes to my agenda yesterday as I learned and found some new information. And the cool thing about this is I'm really uncovering some great software solutions, some things that I didn't know was out
Mm,
there. And so,
that's cool.
I've got a couple people that have like startup ideas and startup companies, and I'm thinking like, great, we'll have kind of like an incubator area where these are
Yeah.
people that have fresh content or fresh concepts and fresh solutions, but they're still
Hmm.
developing their product. And I've
Yeah.
got a couple of announcements that are coming I know Cleaning and Restoration Magazine and Know How are doing are doing a big study, and I'm hoping that we get some information and data released prior to their big let's say release, the official release
Yeah.
in the magazine. So we should have some information where I don't know how much they're going to bring out, but we should have some components of that we can present. And so I have been talking to a couple people. There's one that wants to come up with a new product. And so I'm kind of in just discussions with them on, are they going to be ready? And if they are, how does it fit in? And so
Sure.
if they are going to go big and they're ready, then great. If they're going to go small and just have a presence, or if they're going to wait until the next event. So hard to say yet. So that's how
Absolutely.
technology. I always
Sure.
figure better add on a couple months to what you think it's going to be, and a couple
True, though.
zeros.
Yeah. Yes, that too. Well, Phil, I'm so grateful for your time. Before I let you go here, one question that I ask every single one of my guests is, people enter our industry in a lot of different ways. And whether you're seasoned or, just coming in, I think it's so important to learn from the wisdom of those who have gone before us. Much like reading a book or listening to someone talk, you can gather what took someone maybe years of information and wisdom to gather. You can digest that all. And so you've had many years of experience. I am sure you have many stories that you could share. If you could give one piece of advice, one word of wisdom, I guess it doesn't have to be one. If it's, twofold or
Let me
whatever,
give you a
that's
couple.
fine. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
What would you tell
Yeah.
them?
So a couple of thanks for asking that. The first thing is you got to understand the capital requirements of growing a restoration company. It takes a lot of money, and if you're doing reconstruction, you're going to collect your bills in 45 to 55, 60 days. If you're doing it well, you can push it down below that. You're going to pay your bills. If you do a weekly payroll, or if you're paying your some subcontractors every week, your money goes out in a week. You got a big cash flow. You got a 30-day cash flow there, and just to get to the end. And so know what your capital requirements are, because you can't pay bonuses, buy equipment, get distributions until it's not profit. It's until cash is collected. And so be able to manage your capital requirements and have a really good plan for that. And one of the suggestions I have is to keep 30 days of revenue, or to get 30 days of revenue as a line of credit or cash or some sort of a support to help finance those. One other thing is companies are held back. They can't grow as far as their greatest strengths. They're held back by their greatest weaknesses. And so start taking a look at where your weaknesses are. As you hire people, it's not always about hiring. People hire people that look like themselves, got the skill sets they do. Like, we have so much in common. Let's hire people to your weaknesses and understand what your weaknesses are, and then create a plan to try to overcome those. And so I think that my final piece of advice is start thinking about strategic plan instead of, we're in a crisis business. Like we respond to emergencies, and we don't, there's so many people, can't make a plan because I don't know what's going to happen this afternoon or tomorrow morning. The reality is there's things that still need to happen, and there's directions that you want to go, and there's goals that you want to hit. Why not make a plan in order to get there, and start with how you're going to plan your day tomorrow, or your business around the corner, or what's going on, kind of in relation to that, so you have your map and your guides to get you from here to there. So be strategic. If you're going to buy software, be strategic. If you're going to do a job, be strategic. If you're going to build a company, you have a leadership team, be strategic. So this is my 3 bits of advice. If you're going to get into the restoration industry, you're going to grow a successful company, know your capital requirements, make sure that you know your weaknesses and have a plan to overcome those, and then have a strategic plan that's going to guide you through this process of getting from here to there. So the next 90 days, the next year, the next 3 years, the next 10 years.
That's powerful. And, I love that it's really like 1, 2, 3, like understanding anyone at any level in their, where they're at in this industry can take those pieces of advice and see their value.
Right.
So I appreciate you so much. I appreciate you just sharing some bits of wisdom today, sharing your story. I'm so glad we got the opportunity to connect. For our listeners who are hearing this today, if you get the opportunity, go check out Business Mentors, go check out the Rebuild Conference, and then Restoration Training Online. Very amazing tools that Phil and his team have put forward for our industry to utilize. And I know your business will be better for it. You will be better for it. And I'm grateful for the wisdom I've been able to learn from this conversation today.
Oh, fantastic. Good. Thank you for having
Wonderful.
me. Pleasure to be a part of your podcast and to be connected with you and your team. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, for our listeners, thanks again for joining. You can join us on the next episode of the Building and Branding Podcast.